So, who wants to start? What is the alt-right now? What is the alt-right now? Now, what is the alt-right? 3 different ways of saying the same thing. Who wants to start? Come on, let's go. Don't make me stick a mic in your face. Come on. Amanda?
So it's a modern day white supremacy movement that has really coined the use of social media and the internet as their platform for speech, and was really hyped during the 2016 election.
Mm-hmm. Hyped by whom, by the way?
By at the time, the presidential candidate Trump.
Actually, really?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, was it Trump that Holly argues is primarily responsible for kind of publicizing the alt-right? Or was it?
Clinton based one of her speeches off of it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell us about that. I mean, good idea, bad idea?
Well, bad idea for her because it kind of brought more, attention to the group, and people were searching it more. I said the search rate went up by 20% or something, or times 20.
Are you saying it was a good idea? It was a bad idea for her?
Yeah. So it just brought more attention to the movement, and just more people were interested in it.
Okay. Who wants to argue actually that Holly was arguing that it was actually a wise move on her part to do in terms of the election? Anybody?
Well, it kind of she used it as a tactic to go against Trump. I think, just to say, these are the kind of people who support him, these are the kind of people who back him and have his same, ideology. So I think it helped.
It helped in that sense,
yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
But it may also have hurt her. But most political commentators, when she did it, said, what? This is a great idea, right? You're painting your opponent as affiliated with this new form of what they were saying at the time was a rabid form of white supremacy, right? Yeah. Right? So you see what I'm getting at? So in that sense, it was good political wisdom. But in terms of the alt-right, was it good or bad for the alt-right?
It was good for them because then, it just brought more attention to them.
That's right. It was very good for them, and they were very savvy about it and took advantage of it, right? Okay. What else? Okay, so what else is the alt-right? She says white supremacists, but that's a little bit problematic because, they're actually not in some respects, white supremacists of the past. Who wants to grab that one?
I remember reading it. It said that white supremacists of the past were more out there and more public with their racism. They will host rallies where people can actually come in. But as far as the alt-right, it's not like a certain group of people. They don't have a leader. There's not a leader of the alt-right. It's just people that share the same ideas and that they meet over the internet or whatever.
Right. It's primarily an internet phenomenon, right? It's not that there aren't people out there. It's that it takes place kind of in the shadows of the internet on 4chan and Reddit and other places like that, right? But of course there are some people in the movement who are, more public. They've been doxxed, right? What's it mean to be doxxed?
I'm not sure.
Okay, what's doxing? What's doxing? Kyle?
To leak out, Kyle. Yeah. To leak out person's information.
Yeah, personal information, right? And so sometimes the alt-right has doxed people. They've put out personal addresses and children's names of people that they consider to be particularly evil, right? And of course, the anti-fascist movement, the Antifas, right? These are the people on the left, far left, if you will. They are to the left, some would say, what the alt-right is to the right. These Antifas, the anti-fascists, they're the ones who have doxed some of these people. So Antifas then have used, some of their strategies, right? But the point is that it's still possible to be anonymous, and this is a largely anonymous movement, right? And so, as you say, there's no single leader. It's not a political party, right? Okay. But there are some public ways that the alt-right functions now. Who wants to talk about that? By public, I mean non-anonymous. Jenny?
Like, are you talking about people that are openly alt-right?
Mm-hmm. Are there conferences? Are there institutes?
I think there's, like, people on webcasts or online or whatever. Like, I think it's Tommy Lauren or whatever. She, like, had the Blaze or whatever, and she talked more of, like, the people on the alt-right, and a lot of alt-right people supported her views. So I guess people like that are more open about it, but I don't know about conferences and stuff like that.
All right.
Yeah.
Zach, coming to you.
So, I mean, there is the kind of conferences, stuff like that. There was the real famous one with Richard Spencer and the Hail Victory thing when Trump won the election. That one was really popular. And there's people like Milo Yiannopoulos and Steve Bannon who kind of have taken the alt-right movement and kind of made it a little bit more popular, especially with Milo speaking tours in Bannon's website. So, I mean.
Okay. So what is Holly's conclusion about Bannon and Yiannopoulos? Are they alt-right or are they not alt-right?
So they're not fully alt-right. They're kind of de facto. They're kind of de facto leaders of the alt-right in a way. So they kind of have taken the alt-right and formed it into a more. So they've kind of taken the alt-right and tried to make it. It's their attempt to create a political party from the alt-right, and they're kind of trying to become more serious with it. And I forgot the author's name, but he kind of dubbed it the alt-light or something like that. I can't exactly remember the name. But.
All right. So Holly dubbed people like Yiannopoulos, not so much Bannon, but Ann Coulter, right? Ann Coulter, I don't know how we would describe her. But anyway, people like that as not the alt-right exactly, but the kind of alt-light. They embrace some of their ideas, right? So when we're asking the question, then what is the alt-right? How broad of a definition do we have to kind of use? Zach, what do you think?
Well, you kind of have to use a really broad definition. Kind of how I put it was that there's kind of three kind of factions inside the alt-right, in my opinion. You kind of have the traditional sense, which started a few years back, and then you have the white supremacy, which is the NRX or whatever they dubbed it, and then you have the alt-light. So, I mean, it is kind of three different movements now, and they're all kind of different, but they're all rooted in the same social media online presence and anti-political correctness and stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm not sure if there are just three, but there is certainly a spectrum of influence, shall we say, that the alt-right has. But it is a kind of decentralized movement, right? There are no leaders, so therefore, Andrew Anglin or somebody like that who's, clearly an alt-right figure, he speaks for Andrew Anglin, Others might agree with him, and they might, but it's a back and forth kind of political culture, if you will. All right. All right. Well, what do they believe? What do they believe? You said white supremacist, but you, Durad, noted that in some respects it's not like white supremacist groups. Do you want to make a distinction?
I remember reading in here, it said that some people, they're not like really into like the harsh racism like some neo-Nazis or whatever are into, but they would prefer if I'm blanking out, but anyway, in a nutshell, it was pretty much saying that they would prefer to have only white people, not that they were against other races, but that they would just, like, in a sense, be more comfortable if they had their own race.
Okay, all right. Well, let me ask you this. Are they terrorists? Are they terrorists? Okay, you shake your head. I'm coming to you.
It said that, what do you mean in the sense?
What do you mean?
So
are they
when
terrorists?
They got attacked. There was a few of the leaders, or not the people that were going to speak about the alt-right, and they got attacked before their. I can't remember the one that got attacked.
They've been attacked, but that wouldn't make them terrorists.
I know. And then someone put online that they stay away from violence because they have all the guns and they're veterans and they're just big guys that are part of this movement, so they like stick to online attacking.
Okay, all right. The question is still, are they terrorists? Jenny? You shook your head, girl.
I was just saying no. I mean, like, I just read that they didn't do anything violent to people. I mean, they definitely have kind of weird views about stuff, but I don't.
You think they have terrorist tendencies?
Probably. I would think so. In my opinion, yes.
Okay. Let's compare them to the KKK, the traditional KKK. Talked about, you mentioned white supremacy, right? Mr. Hawley, Dr. Hawley, our author, makes the argument that they aren't like white supremacists before them. They're white nationalists. So what does that mean?
Isn't that like they wanted certain states to be all white or something like that?
It means they want a white nation. They want a white ethnic nation or an ethno-state, right? Okay. Keep in mind, I've still got this question in the back of my mind. I hope you have it in yours. Are they terrorists? They want a white ethnic state, an ethno-state, right? What's that? Okay, so, Kayla, what do you think? Are they terrorists? Well, how are they different? Are they the KKK? Might we just, they're just the KKK.
I mean, they're not violent like the KKK was, so in that sense, they're different, but I guess.
And how violent were the KKK? Just from what you know from class.
They were very violent.
Very violent. I mean, 5,000 lynchings in the South over the space of 4 or 5 decades, 6 or 7 decades, right? They killed people, the KKK. They were terrorists. They were born as a terrorist organization in 1865, 1866. They terrorized. They engaged in violence. They killed people, right? So, is the alt-right a terrorist organization?
Well, isn't terrorism still classified as posing threats? Like saying threats, or like online they're threatening people. They're like saying, oh, we should do this, we need to do that, we're going to do this. Even if they don't do it, that's still classified as terrorism if they're making these threats.
Right, and this is why when you said what you said, I said, well, what do you think of terror? What do you think is terrorism, right? So, if you are an illegal immigrant in this country, you're not protected by DACA. How might you experience this dialogue, these things? How might you experience it? Especially when they say, hey, we want a white ethnic state. By the way, what's that mean about immigration?
It means that there is no immigration if you have a white ethnic state.
That's right. It means we need to stop it, and we might even need to reverse it. Which means what? These people ought to do what?
Like go back home?
They ought to get the hell out of here. That's right. They ought to go back to where they came from. Whatever in the hell that means, right? Go back to where you came from, right? So, we want a white ethnic state. And let me ask you the question. If you are one of those people, might that terrorize you? What about their relationship to President Trump? What about Mr. Trump's relationship to the alt-right?
Well, they, although, like the author said, that Trump himself isn't a part of the alt-right group, the alt-right, like, sort of embraced him as their candidate because of the comments and things he said about immigration and building a wall.
Okay. And in your opinion, his comments about immigration and building a wall, are those, well, racist, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, in a sense, they also cause terror, like you were saying, because that like threatens the people that are here, and is essentially like telling them sort of go back where you came from, just like the alt-right is saying.
Okay. So if we were to boil the alt-right down to a single principle, what would it be? Go home. White nationalism. What's their primary concern? Is it economics? It's race, right? It's race. In that sense, they are racists.
Didn't they say that sure if they said this, but that all white, like a white nation would be like pure, basically.
I think so.
They said that back then as well. So like we're going back to like before, like 1865 and before that. Like they're wanting people, like they did the Back to Africa movement. Like they said go back to Africa, or like they said like they didn't want other people coming in their country. So we're basically going back to where we started.
Okay.
With them.
To be fair, the Back to Africa thing was articulated not only by white folks in America, but by black folks in America, who in fact came to the conclusion, like, we're never going to get a fair shake here, so let's go back to Africa. Other African Americans say, no, this is my country. Wanda Sykes, you know who Wanda Sykes is? Very funny woman. She's come out of the closet now, so I think that her humor is both gendered and racialized, but I love it when she says, I ain't no African American, she says. I'm just an American. She's saying, I don't have anywhere to go back to. I was born in this country. I'm as American as anybody is, right? So in that sense, there's nowhere to go back to for her, right? There's nowhere to go back to, right? Okay. So let me see, where are we? Got a little excited there. The relationship to Trump. Trump is not an alt-right member. He's not alt-right, says our author. By the way, I want to give you permission to disagree with authors. You can read a book like this and think, no, he didn't convince me on this one. Right? That's fine. I like that, and I think that's the way it should be. Not, you shouldn't agree with everything that I say, you shouldn't agree with everything that somebody else says just because it's in a book. He's smart and all. But he might be wrong about some stuff. So this question, for instance, of is the alt-right are they terrorists? He says, no, they're not terrorists. And I read it and think, well, wait a minute. I understand what you're saying, but a lot of people would experience this as terror. Right? Okay, so what about their relationship with Trump? Adriana? Or vice versa, his relationship with them. We already determined that the core of the alt-right is race, and in particular the white race, right? Mm-hmm. So tell us about Trump's relationship with the alt-right.
Didn't he hire somebody from the alt-right movement?
Well, he hired Steve Bannon, who was the head of Breitbart. Breitbart is not, according to Hawley, part of the alt-right. Okay? But anyway, he did hire Steve Bannon. A lot of people said that, Bannon is alt-right. Hawley seems to equivocate a little bit about that. What else?
I don't really know.
Okay. Abigail, I'm coming to you.
I think that the alt-right was really excited about Trump because I remember there was the KKK rally, and Trump was basically siding with the alt-right.
Here you're talking about Charlottesville.
Yes.
In the summer, last summer, right? Where the woman was run over by the car driven by a member of one of these alt-right groups.
And he basically sided with the alt-right, and then he said even that, why aren't we talking about the alt-left? So I think they were like, we have someone on our side.
Okay, so by the way, you may not know the technical answer to this, Abigail, but when someone like President Trump says there were fine people on both sides that day, what do we call that? Other than stupid, maybe. What do we call that? He's trying to.
Is that a fallacy?
Well, I think it's a fallacy, but that's my opinion. But I mean, he's trying to do something. What's he trying to do?
Avert to the real issue. So he's kind of wishy-washy.
Well, on this particular case, I think not, although President Trump does that, and the people that work for him do that. You ask them a question, and they give you an answer, but if you listen real close, it's frequently not the answer to the question you asked, it's something else. By the way, both parties do this. Politicians do it all the time, both parties. It's a way of talking, and for people who really aren't paying attention to sound like you're making sense. But this is what we call seeking to show moral equivalence, right? Moral equivalency. It's a moral equivalency argument. Essentially what Trump did by saying there are good people on both sides of this issue is he minimized he minimized, for lack of a better term, the bad or the evil, right? Okay. Now, whether or not he's right is an important question, but he certainly sought to minimize the evil of Charlottesville, if you will, right? And that didn't set well with, it didn't set well with a large swath of the country, it's fair to say. Even people who supported him otherwise thought, nah, that's a bridge too far. Okay? All right, so he seems to defend them. What else? Nate? What else about Mr. Trump needs to be noted in terms of this question of his relationship to the alt-right or their relationship to him?
Well, their stance on immigration, his as well, what he supports, the wall and everything else. That's definitely something for them to jump onto as far as bandwagon goes, to support. They don't want anyone else other than white race here, so of course you're going to support the candidate that has the strongest immigration policies.
That's right. And before the semester's over, you'll do some readings on how we explain the Trump phenomenon, right? And how we explain the fact that he was elected when it seemed to everybody that, even to him probably, I'm of the opinion that he was in shock the night he was elected. That's why his speech was so flat. That's why when they walked out on the stage, Melania was like this, and Barron was like this, and Trump was like, oh, God, I just got elected president. What am I going to do now? You know what I'm saying? I don't think he expected it. Nobody expected it, right? But it happened. And we'll seek to explain it. And one of the explanations that's bandied about, it started coming out the day after the election, was this notion that disaffected white middle class, working class people who had suffered economically were the driving force in the election of Trump, right? And yet, the point that I think Holly would want us to see, and that you have mentioned, Nate, is that, let's face it, when Trump comes down the escalator and he announces his presidency, what is the first thing he says, basically? Huh? Yeah.
Rapists, drug dealers, all that kind of murderers, all that kind of crap.
That's right. Immigration is the problem in this country. We need to build a wall because Mexico is sending their drug dealers and their rapists over, right? Notice that from the start, he made his campaign about race. That is to say, about immigration. Now, another thing that we need to learn in this class is that there are ways to say things that are seemingly innocuous. We call them, in the case of race language, we call them race neutral. We call it race neutral language. So, you can say immigration, and it sounds like you're talking about immigration when in fact you can be talking about race. You can say drug dealers, and it sounds like you're talking about drug dealers, but in fact you might be talking about black people, or Mexican people. Or you can say gangs, and it sounds like you're talking about crime and public safety, when in fact, in your heart, you're talking about MS-13 and these Mexicans that are raping and pillaging, right? You can say welfare. You can say welfare, and studies have shown that when people hear such things, even people of color, they think of a colored person, not of a white person, right? So in other words, there are all kinds of coy ways to speak in the political realm which can be coded, right? So, if we say immigration, and someone says, oh, well, you're a racist, then I, as a good Republican, say, no, I'm not racist. I'm interested in the economy. I'm tired of, people coming over here and keeping wages low. We need to keep them out so that wages will go up so that Americans can live better, right? There are all kinds of race-neutral ways that we can talk about stuff, but it's not necessarily race neutral. But it's also not, shall we say, coy, or it's not obvious, right? Is that how the alt-right works? No. I mean, they do use code. So Pepe means, something or other, right? Memes are important to them. They do use code. Conservatives, okay, they do use code, but they also don't. They're very aggressive and very frontal. And of course, they can do this because why? They're anonymous. Right. I mean, if you've ever been trolled, you know what I'm talking about. Right? If you've ever been trolled, you know. And so they're anonymous. All right? Okay, what do they want? They want a white ethnic state or an ethno-state. So what? Still, I'm still fishing here for, we're trying to define the alt-right. What else do we need to say? Relationship with Trump, for the most part, they like him. Is that fair to say? For the most part, he seems to, be okay with them. I think it's fair to say. He does condemn some of their activities, but he's been very, very reticent to do so. Seems to me the only person that he criticizes less is, of course, Putin, right? So it seems to be that although Trump is not a member of the alt-right, by the way, somebody make the argument he's not alt-right. That might be too hard to do. But I mean, you can find things that he does. For instance, like favoring the rich. Like favoring corporate America, like favoring Wall Street. You can find things that he does, which in fact the alt-right wouldn't like. Right? And yet, what do we also know about the alt-right? Are they primarily concerned about economics? No, they're primarily concerned about race, right. What's their relationship to feminism? What? They're misogynistic guys, huh?
Like why don't men get maternity leave type stuff? Like those guys who kind of their whole thing is they troll people, so they just poke fun at social issues and
What's their problem with feminism?
I don't know. I mean, more so that they just make fun of it. They just don't take it serious.
They take it seriously. They take it so seriously that they mock it. So my question is, why do they mock it?
They believe that older men in the family should have more power than women.
Okay, so they're patriarchal in that sense. I saw another hand. Who was it? Jenny?
They still think that men should have more power than women. They should have more.
But why? It's a very important point. Is it because is gender a social construction, or is it biological? It is biological. That's very important too, okay? And so as the hour draws to a close, I want you to see that these people are a melange, a collection of a lot of different thoughts, but they're kind of eugenicist. They believe in nature over nurture, so they're anti-feminist because feminism argues that women should have every right that men do, to fall out of their chair, to have no man go and help when she's falling out of her chair, whatever the case may be, right? She's equal with me, I don't have to open the door for her, that kind of thing, right? Now there's more to it than that. So a good patriarchal male makes fun of a woman who almost falls out of... No, I'm joking. But let me finish by saying this. Another kind of core principle is that they are not egalitarians. They are not liberals. They are not egalitarians. And remember, conservatives, according to Holly, are actually egalitarians to some degree. So that, notice, the Constitution of the United States, if it says that all men are created equal, and it means all people are created equal, the alt-right feels fine saying, well, that's just the Constitution. We know biologically there is a natural and definitive and unbroachable difference between women, and men have certain roles, and women have certain roles, and women shouldn't do men stuff, and men shouldn't do women stuff, right? Okay, well, I'm not sure that we fleshed it out perfectly, but we did a pretty good job. Have a good weekend, okay?